Timothy Lewis's genitals become the center of an interstellar incident. The human diplomat shifts uncomfortably in his seat aboard the Gorn diplomatic vessel as Ambassador Xena, a striking female with iridescent scales and piercing green eyes, reaches for his crotch. Her scaly hand makes contact, causing Timothy to stiffen in shock. "What is this biological appendage?" Xena asks, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. "Is it some kind of toy?" Timothy's mind races. This first contact situation has taken an unexpected turn, threatening the delicate human-Gorn alliance. He struggles to maintain composure as Xena's probing fingers continue their exploration. "Ambassador Xena," Timothy begins, his voice strained, "I appreciate your interest in human physiology, but this is a rather sensitive area." The door to the private meeting chamber hisses open. Captain Zorn, the Gorn military liaison, stomps in. His reptilian eyes narrow as he takes in the scene before him. "What is the meaning of this?" Zorn bellows, misinterpreting Timothy's flushed face and Xena's hand placement. Timothy's heart pounds. He opens his mouth to explain, but Xena speaks first. "Captain, I've discovered a fascinating biological feature on the human," she exclaims, her scaled fingers still wrapped around Timothy's most private area. Zorn's posture stiffens. "Remove your hand from the human, Ambassador," he orders. "This is a clear violation of diplomatic protocol." Timothy feels sweat beating on his forehead. The sterile chamber, with its sleek, organic-looking furniture, suddenly feels claustrophobic. He needs to defuse this situation before it spirals out of control. "There's been a misunderstanding," Timothy says, gently removing Xena's hand. "Ambassador Xena was merely expressing scientific curiosity about human anatomy. I assure you, no protocols were violated." Zorn's eyes narrow further. "Is that so? Then perhaps you'd care to explain the nature of this anatomical feature?" Timothy swallows hard. He can't reveal too much about human vulnerabilities, especially not to a potential military threat, but he also can't risk offending the Gorn or derailing the entire diplomatic mission. "It's a reproductive organ," Timothy says carefully, "unique to human males." Xena's eyes widen with fascination. "Reproductive? You mean it's used for—" Suddenly, alarms blare throughout the ship. Red lights flash, bathing the organic curves of the chamber in an eerie glow. "We're under attack," Zorn shouts, all thoughts of the diplomatic incident forgotten. The ship rocks violently, throwing Timothy and the Gorn off balance. As they stumble to regain their footing, Timothy realizes the stakes have just gotten much higher. Not only does he have to navigate this delicate cultural misunderstanding, but now he must do so while under fire from an unknown alien force. As Zorn rushes to a control panel, barking orders in the Gorn language, Timothy catches Xena's eye. The ambassador's gaze flicks briefly to his crotch before meeting his eyes again. In that moment, Timothy understands that this incident is far from over. The Gorn now possess intimate knowledge of human physiology, knowledge they might use to exploit weaknesses in their new allies. Another explosion rocks the ship. Timothy grips a nearby console to steady himself. Whatever happens next, he knows one thing for certain: the fate of human-Gorn relations, and possibly the safety of Earth itself, now rests squarely on his shoulders and his compromised genitals. Another explosion rocked the ship, nearly knocking Timothy off his feet. He exchanged a quick glance with Xena, their earlier awkward encounter momentarily forgotten in the face of imminent danger. "To the bridge!" Captain Zorn bellowed, already striding toward the door. "Now!" Timothy and Xena fell in behind the captain as they raced through the organic-looking corridors of the Gorn vessel. The ship's alien architecture, with its curved walls and pulsing bioluminescent lights, only added to Timothy's sense of disorientation as alarms continued to blare. They burst onto the bridge, a cavernous space dominated by a massive view screen. Timothy's breath caught in his throat as he saw the source of their peril, a colossal vessel filled with weapon arrays, its design unlike anything he'd ever encountered. "Krell!" Zorn spat the word like a curse. "Filthy expansionists!" Timothy's mind raced. The Krell were known throughout the galaxy as a hostile, aggressive species, always seeking to conquer new territories. Their presence here could spell disaster not only for this ship, but for the entire human-Gorn alliance. Captain Zorn wasted no time, barking orders to his crew in the guttural Gorn language. Timothy watched as the reptilian beings moved with practiced efficiency, their scaled hands flying over control panels. "Ambassador," Zorn turned to Timothy, his voice gruff, "your assistance would be appreciated." Timothy nodded, pushing aside his surprise at the captain's request. He moved to a nearby console, studying the alien interface. Years of diplomatic training kicked in as he quickly deciphered the Gorn technology. The ship shuddered as it executed evasive maneuvers, barely avoiding a barrage of Krell weapons fire. Timothy's eyes darted across the tactical display, noting the Krell attack pattern. Something about it seemed off. "Captain," Timothy called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around him, "I think I see a weakness in their strategy. If we use the gravitic drive to create a localized spatial distortion, we might be able to confuse their targeting systems." Zorn's reptilian eyes narrowed, considering the human's words. After a tense moment, he nodded. "Explain." Timothy outlined his plan, his hands moving across the console to illustrate his points. As he spoke, he became aware of Xena moving closer, her scaled body radiating heat as she leaned in to study the display. "Brilliant," she murmured, her breath warm against Timothy's ear. "But risky. The gravitic drive wasn't designed for such precise manipulation." "It's our best shot," Timothy replied, acutely aware of Xena's proximity. Zorn gave a curt nod. "Do it." Timothy and Xena worked in tandem, their earlier awkwardness transforming into a fluid partnership. As they manipulated the unfamiliar Gorn controls, their hands often brushed against each other, sending unexpected tingles through Timothy's body. The ship groaned as the gravitic drive engaged, creating ripples in the fabric of space around them. For a heart-stopping moment, Timothy feared he'd miscalculated. The vessel shuddered violently, threatening to tear itself apart. Acting on instinct, Timothy reached across Xena to adjust the drive's output. His body pressed against hers, their faces mere inches apart. Time seemed to slow as their eyes met, a charged moment stretching between them amidst the chaos. Suddenly, the shuddering stopped. On the display, the Krell ship's weapons fire went wild, missing them by kilometers. "It worked!" Xena exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Captain Zorn wasted no time. "Full retreat! Get us out of here!" As the Gorn ship limped away, the Krell launched a final desperate attack. Missiles streaked toward them, threatening to undo their narrow escape. "The waste disposal system," Timothy blurted out. "We can use it to release a cloud of debris. It'll obscure our escape vector." Zorn hesitated for only a second before issuing the command. Moments later, a massive cloud of junk erupted from the ship's stern, creating a protective screen of garbage that absorbed the incoming Krell missiles. As the immediate danger passed, an uneasy silence fell over the bridge. Timothy became acutely aware of the Gorn crew's eyes upon him, some filled with newfound respect, others with lingering suspicion. Xena broke the silence. "That was impressive, Ambassador Lewis." Her voice carried a note of admiration that made Timothy's pulse quicken. "Perhaps you'd like a tour of our more sensitive areas, to further cement our alliance, of course." Before Timothy could respond, Captain Zorn cut in. "That won't be necessary, Ambassador Xena. Our human guest has seen quite enough for one day." The tension on the bridge ratcheted up a notch. Timothy could sense the conflict brewing between Xena's diplomatic openness and Zorn's military caution. He opened his mouth to speak, hoping to find some middle ground, when another alarm blared. "Hull breach in Section 7, a Gorn officer called out. "We need immediate repairs." As the crew scrambled to address this new crisis, Timothy realized that his trials were nowhere near the end. The Krell attack had opened up new possibilities for human-Gorn cooperation, but it had also exposed vulnerabilities that could tear the alliance apart. With Xena's curious gaze still upon him and Captain Zorn's suspicious glare burning into his back, Timothy took a deep breath. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he'd have to navigate them carefully. The fate of two species might very well depend on it. As the immediate crisis subsided, Timothy found himself at the center of an unexpected development. Captain Zorn, his reptilian features set in a grim expression, approached the human diplomat. "Ambassador Lewis," Zorn said, his voice a low rumble. "Your assistance during the attack was invaluable. Perhaps we have underestimated the potential of our alliance." Timothy nodded cautiously, acutely aware of the crew's eyes upon him. "Thank you, Captain. I'm glad I could help." Xena stepped forward, her scales shimmering under the bridge's pulsing lights. "Captain, if I may suggest, given the ambassador's aptitude with our systems, perhaps a more thorough tour of our vessel is in order." Zorn's eyes narrowed, clearly weighing the risks and benefits of such a proposal. After a tense moment, he gave a curt nod. "Agreed, but I will accompany you." As they made their way through the ship's winding corridors, Timothy marveled at the organic architecture. Bioluminescent panels pulsed in rhythm with the ship's systems, creating an otherworldly ambiance. Their first stop was the engineering section. Timothy's eyes widened as he took in the complex array of technology, so different from human designs. He approached a console, his fingers hovering over the alien interface. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The integration of biological and mechanical components is far beyond anything we've achieved." Xena smiled, her sharp teeth glinting. "Our engineers have spent generations perfecting this symbiosis." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. The deck beneath their feet shuddered violently, nearly throwing them off balance. "Report!" Zorn barked into a communicator. A panicked voice responded, "Critical malfunction in the gravitic drive, Captain. The chief engineer is down, injured from the Krell attack. We can't stabilize it." Timothy's mind raced. The gravitic drive, the very system he had pushed to its limits during their escape. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "I can help." Zorn's reptilian eyes bored into him. "You? This is highly advanced Gorn technology, human." "With all due respect, Captain," Timothy countered, "I've already demonstrated some understanding of your systems. We don't have time for debate." Another violent shudder ran through the ship. Zorn hissed in frustration. "Fine. Ambassador Xena, accompany him. Keep him under close observation." Timothy and Xena sprinted towards the drive core, the ship's tremors growing more intense with each passing moment. They burst into a massive chamber, dominated by a pulsating sphere of energy, tendrils of exotic matter writhing within. "The containment field is failing," Xena shouted over the roar of the malfunctioning drive. "We need to reroute power and recalibrate the field harmonics." Timothy nodded, moving to a nearby console. His hands flew over the alien controls, guided by an intuition he couldn't fully explain. Xena worked beside him, their bodies occasionally brushing in the cramped space. As Timothy manipulated a particularly complex sequence, his hands slipped, activating an unknown system. Suddenly, his world exploded into sensation. Every nerve in his body seemed to ignite, his mind flooded with a torrent of data and alien sensations. He gasped, staggering back. What's happening?" Xena's eyes widened in shock. "You've activated the bio-neural interface. It's not designed for human physiology." Timothy's vision swam, filled with streams of data and ship schematics he somehow understood. He could feel the ship's systems as if they were extensions of his own body. The failing gravitic drive a throbbing wound in his mind. I can see it," he managed to say through gritted teeth. "The drive. I know how to fix it." His hands moved of their own accord, manipulating controls with inhuman speed and precision. The ship's shuddering began to subside, the wail of alarms fading. Xena watched in amazement, but her expression quickly turned to concern. "Timothy, you need to disengage. The interface could cause permanent damage to your nervous system." She moved closer, her scaled hands gripping Timothy's shoulders. "I need to break the connection manually. This may be intense." Xena's fingers found specific points on Timothy's body, applying pressure in a complex sequence. The sensation was electric, sending shockwaves of pleasure and pain through Timothy's overstimulated nervous system. As Xena worked to disengage him, Timothy became acutely aware of her presence. He could sense her bioelectric field, feel the heat radiating from her body. The psychic bleed-over from the ship's systems heightened every sensation, turning their necessary physical contact into an overwhelmingly intimate experience. Finally, with a gasp, Timothy felt the connection snap. He stumbled, falling against Xena. She caught him, her strong arms wrapping around his body. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. Timothy nodded weakly, but he knew something had fundamentally changed. Every touch, every sound, every sensation was magnified, and deep in his mind he could still feel the echo of the ship's systems. On the bridge, Captain Zorn watched the events unfold on his monitor, his expression unreadable. He turned to his science officer, speaking in low tones. "Begin full spectrum analysis of the human's neural patterns. This development could change everything." As Timothy leaned against Xena, struggling to regain his equilibrium, he was unaware of the far-reaching consequences his actions would have. The ship's course was already changing, steering them towards an uncertain future that would test the limits of the fragile human-Gorn alliance. As Timothy struggled to process the lingering effects of his connection to the ship's systems, the Gorn vessel smoothly entered the asteroid field, concealing their destination. "We're approaching the research facility," Xena announced, her scaled hand resting gently on Timothy's shoulder. "How are you feeling?" Timothy blinked, his heightened senses still overwhelming. "I'm managing. Everything feels so intense." The ship docked with a hidden port nestled within a massive asteroid. As they disembarked, Timothy marveled at the sprawling complex carved into the rock. Bioluminescent fungi lined the corridors, casting an eerie glow that pulsed in rhythm with Timothy's accelerated heartbeat. Captain Zorn led them through a maze of tunnels, finally stopping before a set of intricately carved doors. "This is the medical bay," he growled. "Dr. Zira will examine you, Ambassador Lewis." The door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with unfamiliar equipment. A tall, slender Gorn with iridescent scales approached them. "Welcome, I am Dr. Zira. Please, lie down on the examination table." Timothy complied, acutely aware of the cold surface against his skin. Dr. Zira activated a hovering array of instruments, which emitted a soft hum as they scanned his body. "Fascinating," Dr. Zira muttered, her eyes widening as she studied the readouts. "Your neural patterns are unlike anything I've seen before. The interface has altered your brain chemistry significantly." As the doctor continued her examination, Timothy felt a strange pressure building in his mind. Suddenly, several nearby machines sprang to life, their displays flickering with rapidly changing data. "What's happening?" Timothy gasped, sitting up abruptly. Dr. Zira's scaled brow furrowed. "It appears your psionic abilities are manifesting more strongly. You're unconsciously activating our equipment." Xena moved closer, her presence seeming to calm the chaotic energy surrounding Timothy. "Try to relax," she said softly, placing her hand on his arm. The moment their skin made contact, Timothy felt a jolt of electricity course through his body. His senses sharpened even further, and he became acutely aware of Xena's bioelectric field pulsing in sync with his own. Dr. Zira observed this interaction with keen interest. "Ambassador Xena, please maintain physical contact with the patient. It seems to stabilize his neural patterns." As the examination progressed, Timothy found himself hyper-aware of Xena's touch. Her scales were surprisingly smooth, and he could feel the heat radiating from her body. The prolonged contact began to affect Xena as well, her breathing becoming slightly labored. Suddenly, Timothy's powers surged again. This time, they triggered something within Xena. A sweet, musky scent filled the air, and Timothy felt an overwhelming wave of attraction wash over him. Dr. Zira's eyes widened in surprise. "Fascinating. It appears the human has inadvertently triggered a pheromone release in Ambassador Xena. This could have significant implications for interspecies communication and bonding." Xena's grip on Timothy's arm tightened, her pupils dilating as she met his gaze. The tension between them was palpable, charged with an unexpected intimacy that transcended their biological differences. Dr. Zira quickly made some notes on her data pad. "I believe we should explore this further. The potential for enhancing our biotechnology through human psionic abilities is too great to ignore." As Timothy and Xena tried to regain their composure, Captain Zorn entered the medical bay. His expression was unreadable as he addressed Dr. Zira. The human's condition? Stable but rapidly evolving, Dr. Zira replied. His connection to our technology is unprecedented. With your permission, I'd like to begin a more comprehensive study. Zorn nodded curtly. Proceed. I must speak with General Kraz about this development. He turned to leave, then paused. Ambassador Lewis, you will remain here for further testing. Ambassador Xena, you're to assist Dr. Zira as needed. As the door closed behind Zorn, Timothy felt a mix of apprehension and excitement. He knew he was on the cusp of something monumental, but the implications were still unclear. Dr. Zira approached with a series of neural interfaces. Shall we begin exploring the full extent of your abilities, Ambassador Lewis? Timothy nodded, stealing a glance at Xena. Her scales shimmered with an intensity he hadn't noticed before, and he felt an inexplicable pull towards her. As Dr. Zira attached the interfaces to Timothy's temples, he took a deep breath. Whatever lay ahead, he knew his world would never be the same. The boundaries between human and Gorn, between organic and machine, were blurring, and somewhere in that blurred space, a new future was taking shape. The hum of the medical equipment filled the air as Timothy prepared for the next phase of tests, unaware of the classified project being set in motion by Captain Zorn and General Kraz, or the challenges that awaited him in the coming days. The fate of two species now rested in part on the unprecedented connection forming between a human diplomat and the alien technology that had irreversibly changed him. As the neural interfaces hummed to life, Timothy felt a familiar surge of energy coursing through his body. The sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying, a reminder of the vast unknown he was about to explore. Are you ready? Dr. Zira asked, her scaled fingers hovering over the final activation switch. Timothy nodded, stealing a glance at Xena. Her eyes met his, filled with a mix of anticipation and concern. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. The doctor pressed the switch, and Timothy's world exploded into a kaleidoscope of sensations. His mind expanded, reaching out beyond the confines of his body and into the vast network of the experimental Gorn battlecruiser. At first, the flood of data threatened to overwhelm him. Timothy's body convulsed, his back arching off the medical table as he struggled to process the incoming information. Alarms blared, and Dr. Zira moved to terminate the connection. Wait, Xena called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. She stepped forward, placing her scaled hand on Timothy's forehead. Let me help. Without hesitation, Xena initiated her own neural link. Her mind merged with Timothy's, their consciousness intertwining within the ship's bio-neural interface. The effect was immediate. Timothy's convulsions subsided, his breathing steadied, and the alarms fell silent. As their minds synchronized, Timothy felt Xena's presence like a soothing balm. Her Gorn mental discipline provided a framework for him to organize and process the vast influx of data. Together, they navigated the complex network of the battlecruiser's systems, becoming one with the ship itself. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the facility. Captain Zorn's voice crackled over the intercom, urgent and filled with tension. The Krell fleet has begun their assault. We need to launch immediately. Timothy and Xena, now functioning as a single entity with the ship, sprang into action. Their combined consciousness flowed through the battlecruiser's systems, bringing engines online and activating defensive shields. The massive doors of the asteroid hangar slid open, revealing the chaos of space beyond. Krell warships swarmed like angry insects, their weapons leaving trails of destruction across the star-filled backdrop. With a thought, Timothy and Xena guided the battlecruiser out of its berth. The ship responded to their mental commands with breathtaking speed and precision, executing a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible for any conventional pilot. As they entered the fray, Timothy's latent psionic abilities surged to new heights. He could sense the enemy ships, their positions and trajectories, appearing in his mind like glowing constellations. This intuitive awareness, combined with Xena's intimate knowledge of Gorn weaponry, made them a formidable force. The battlecruiser danced through the void, evading enemy fire with impossible grace. Timothy and Xena worked in perfect harmony, targeting Krell vessels with devastating accuracy. Each successful hit sent a rush of satisfaction through their shared consciousness. As the battle raged on, Timothy became aware of subtle changes in his body. His skin felt tight and itchy, and his vision sharpened to an almost painful degree. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a nearby monitor and gasped. Patches of scale-like protrusions had begun to form on his skin, and his eyes had taken on a distinctly reptilian appearance. "What's happening to me?" Timothy's thought echoed through their mental link. Xena's response came swiftly, tinged with a mix of awe and concern. "The interface is changing you, adapting your physiology to better integrate with our technology. It's unprecedented." Before they could dwell on these changes, a barrage of Krell torpedoes forced their attention back to the battle. Timothy and Xena guided the ship through a series of corkscrews and rolls, their movements so perfectly synchronized that ship and pilot seemed to move as one. In a moment of relative calm, their mental link deepened unexpectedly. Memories and emotions began to flow between them, creating an intimacy that transcended physical boundaries. Timothy saw flashes of Xena's childhood, felt the weight of her responsibilities as an ambassador. In turn, Xena experienced the wonder of Timothy's first space flight, the loneliness of being the only human in a sea of aliens. This newfound connection intensified their combat effectiveness, allowing them to anticipate each other's thoughts and actions with uncanny precision. But it also complicated their relationship, blurring the lines between human and Gorn identities. Their moment of introspection was shattered by a massive impact. Alarms blared as the battlecruiser's propulsion system took a direct hit from a Krell warship. "We've lost main engines!" Timothy's thought rang out, tinged with panic. Xena's response was calm, her mental voice steady. "We need to initiate emergency repairs. Timothy, you'll have to interface directly with the ship's core." As Xena guided him through the unfamiliar Gorn biomechanical procedures, Timothy felt a sense of trepidation. He knew that this deeper connection could have unforeseen consequences, but they had no choice. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Timothy reached out, both physically and mentally, to connect with the pulsing heart of the battlecruiser. As his fingers made contact with the organic circuitry, he felt a jolt of energy surge through his body. His mind expanded once again, but this time, it wasn't just the ship's systems he was connecting to. A flood of Gorn genetic memory washed over him, centuries of accumulated knowledge threatening to drown his human consciousness. Timothy struggled to maintain his sense of self as alien experiences and emotions crashed through his mind like a tidal wave. Just as he felt himself slipping away, lost in the vast ocean of Gorn memory, he felt Xena's presence, her consciousness wrapped around his, an anchor in the storm. Through their mental link, she helped him navigate the flood of information, guiding him back to himself. As the repair process neared completion, Timothy became aware that something fundamental had changed. His connection to the ship had deepened beyond anything he had experienced before. He could feel every system, every circuit, as if they were extensions of his own body. More than that, he realized his awareness now extended beyond the confines of their battlecruiser. He could sense the nearby Krell vessels, their bio-neural systems pulsing like beacons in his mind. With a mix of wonder and apprehension, Timothy prepared to test the limits of this new ability. The battle was not nearly finished, and he knew that the next few moments could determine the fate of both humanity and the Gorn. As he reached out with his mind towards the enemy fleet, he felt Xena's unwavering presence beside him, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he extended his consciousness towards the enemy fleet, Timothy felt a surge of power unlike anything he had experienced before. His awareness expanded exponentially, enveloping the surrounding space and the ships within it. "I can sense them," Timothy communicated through their mental link. "The Krell vessels, they're not just machines. They're alive." Xena's surprise rippled through their shared consciousness. "Alive? How is that possible?" Before Timothy could respond, a massive shape loomed before them. The Krell dreadnought, a behemoth of metal and organic matter, filled their view. Its surface pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, confirming Timothy's revelation. "We need to get closer," Timothy thought, his tenacity echoing through their bond. "If we can interface with their systems, we might be able to turn the tide of this battle." As they maneuvered their experimental battlecruiser towards the dreadnought, Timothy became acutely aware of the changes occurring within his body. His skin tingled and itched, and he could feel a strange shifting beneath the surface. Glancing down at his arms, he watched in fascination as iridescent scales began to form, spreading rapidly across his skin. Xena's concern filtered through their link. "Timothy, your transformation, it's accelerating." He met her gaze, noticing the way her eyes widened at his appearance. "I know, but we can't stop now. We're too close." As they approached the Krell vessel, its defenses came to life. A barrage of energy weapons lit up the void, forcing Timothy and Xena to execute a series of complex evasive maneuvers. Their minds worked in perfect synchronization, guiding the ship through the deadly field of fire with preternatural precision. Timothy's expanded psionic abilities allowed him to anticipate the Krell's attacks, giving them a crucial edge. As they wove through the onslaught, he could sense the thought patterns of the Krell crew, alien and chaotic, yet strangely familiar. "I can feel them," Timothy communicated. "Their minds, they're not so different from ours." Before Xena could respond, a massive energy blast struck their ship. The impact sent a surge through the bio-neural systems, momentarily severing Timothy and Xena's mental link. In that instant of disconnect, Timothy's mind was flooded with a torrent of conflicting memories and sensations. Human experiences clashed with Gorn instincts, threatening to tear his psyche apart. He saw flashes of Earth, of his childhood home, intermingled with alien landscapes and unfamiliar rituals. The boundaries of his identity began to blur, and he felt himself slipping away. "Timothy!" Xena's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold on to who you are!" Through the haze of confusion, Timothy felt Xena's scaled hands on his face. Her touch anchored him, pulling him back from the brink of losing himself. As their eyes met, he saw grit and something deeper in her gaze. "We need to stabilize your mind," Xena said urgently. "There's a Gorn bonding ritual. It's never been attempted with a human before, but it might be our only chance." Timothy nodded, trusting her completely. "Do it." Xena began to guide him through the ritual, her voice a soothing presence in his mind. As they progressed, Timothy felt a strange warmth spreading through his body. He looked down to see his skin emitting a soft, pulsating glow that matched the rhythm of the ship's bio-neural systems. The ritual deepened their connection beyond anything they had experienced before. Timothy could feel Xena's thoughts and emotions as if they were his own, and he knew she was experiencing the same. Their individual consciousnesses began to merge, forming a new hybrid mind that was neither fully human nor fully Gorn. As the bonding reached its peak, Timothy and Xena's merged consciousness unexpectedly interfaced with the Krell dreadnought systems. The alien ship's defenses, caught off guard by this unprecedented intrusion, faltered. The Krell ships, Timothy and Xena thought as one, they're partially organic. That's why our psionic abilities have been so effective. Seizing this advantage, they launched a coordinated psychic assault on the dreadnought's organic components. Their hybrid mind, now intimately familiar with both human and Gorn thought patterns, proved to be devastatingly effective against the Krell's defenses. The massive ship shuddered as chaos erupted among its crew. Systems began to fail, and gaps appeared in its formidable shields. The human Gorn fleet, quick to notice the dreadnought's sudden vulnerability, concentrated their fire on the weakened sections. As Timothy and Xena pressed their attack, they began to uncover fragments of Krell memory. Images of a distant galaxy, consumed by an unimaginable threat, flashed through their shared mind. They realized with a start that the Krell were not conquerors, but refugees, fleeing from an enemy that threatened to annihilate them. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to their mission. The hybrid consciousness grappled with the moral implications of their actions, even as they continued their assault on the Krell defenses. The strain of maintaining such an intense psychic connection began to take its toll. Timothy's body continued to change, his features becoming more pronouncedly Gorn-like with each passing moment. Xena, in turn, experienced flashes of human emotion and memory that threatened to overwhelm her Gorn sensibilities. As the Krell dreadnought's defenses crumbled under their combined psychic and physical assault, Timothy and Xena realized they were approaching a critical juncture. To deliver the final blow and end the battle, they would need to push their hybrid abilities to the absolute limit. We have to do this, their merged consciousness decided, for the sake of both our peoples. They steered their experimental battlecruiser into position, preparing for one final, decisive strike against the Krell dreadnought. As they approached, the boundaries between human, Gorn, and machine blurred even further. Timothy and Xena's hybrid mind melded with the ship's bio-neural systems, creating a singular entity of flesh, scale, and technology. With the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance, they surged forward, ready to unleash the full power of their unprecedented union against the Krell threat. The final confrontation loomed before them, promising to reshape the future of the galaxy in ways none could have predicted. As Timothy and Xena's hybrid consciousness surged forward, their experimental battlecruiser pulsed with an otherworldly energy. The ship's bio-neural systems, now fully integrated with their merged minds, hummed with unprecedented power. The final assault on the Krell dreadnought began, pushing their hybrid abilities to the very brink. Timothy felt his body changing even further, scales spreading across his skin in a rapid cascade. His flesh began to emit a brilliant bioluminescent glow, matching the patterns that danced across Xena's form. Their mental link deepened beyond anything they had experienced before. Individual thoughts and memories blurred, coalescing into a singular consciousness that bridged the gap between human and Gorn neural structures. In this moment of ultimate fusion, they were neither Timothy nor Xena, but something entirely new. The hybrid entity launched a powerful psychic attack against the Krell dreadnought's organic components. Waves of psionic energy coursed through space, invisible to the naked eye, but devastatingly effective against the living ship. Inside the Krell vessel, chaos erupted. Systems failed in cascading waves as the psychic assault disrupted the intricate biomechanical network. Alarms blared, and alien crew members scrambled to maintain control of their rapidly deteriorating ship. The human Gorn fleet, sensing the dreadnought's sudden vulnerability, concentrated their fire on the weakening sections. Energy beams and missiles found their marks with deadly precision, tearing through the once impenetrable hull. As the hybrid consciousness penetrated deeper into the Krell ship's neural network, fragments of alien knowledge flooded their merged mind. Images of a distant galaxy, worlds consumed by an unimaginable threat, flashed before them. The truth hit them with the force of a supernova. The Krell were refugees, driven to desperate measures by the annihilation of their home. The realization sent shockwaves through their shared psyche. The hybrid entity grappled with the moral implications of their actions, human empathy clashing with Gorn pragmatism. They now possessed the power to potentially destroy the Krell entirely, but doing so would mean the extinction of a species acting out of sheer survival instinct. In the crucible of this ethical dilemma, a daring plan took shape. They would attempt communication with the Krell, using their enhanced psionic abilities to bridge the vast gulf between their species. The decision made, the hybrid entity began to lower its psychic defenses. It was a dangerous gambit, leaving them vulnerable to potential Krell counterattacks, but it was the only way to establish a meaningful connection. As they opened a mental channel to the Krell leadership, a flood of alien consciousness rushed into their minds. The sheer otherness of the Krell psyche threatened to overwhelm their already strained mental fusion. Timothy's human capacity for empathy worked in tandem with Xena's Gorn analytical skills, struggling to process and understand the complex layers of Krell psychology. The initial contact was chaotic and violent, a maelstrom of fear, desperation, and aggression. The hybrid consciousness fought to maintain coherence, projecting thoughts of peace and cooperation into the tempest of the Krell mind. Slowly, painfully, understanding began to form. The Krell, initially suspicious and hostile, started to respond to the unique perspective offered by the human-Gorn hybrid. Their aggression gave way to curiosity, then to a cautious hope. As the psychic negotiations progressed, the physical battle around them began to slow. Ships on both sides held their fire, crews sensing the unusual nature of the communication occurring between the experimental battlecruiser and the Krell dreadnought. A tense silence fell over the battlefield, punctuated only by the occasional spark of damaged systems and the low hum of engines on standby. The strain of maintaining this complex psychic interaction pushed the hybrid entity to its limits. Their physical form, still aboard the experimental battlecruiser, began to exhibit signs of severe stress. Sweat beaded on Timothy's scaled skin, while Xena's normally steady hands trembled. The ship's bio-neural systems, intimately connected to their hybrid physiology, started to overload. Warning signals flashed across control panels, indicating the imminent risk of a catastrophic failure. Despite the mounting physical toll, the hybrid consciousness pressed on. They delved deeper into the Krell psyche, unraveling the complex motivations behind their desperate expansion. In turn, they shared their own experiences, the unique blend of human adaptability and Gorn resilience that had allowed their alliance to flourish. As understanding grew, so did the possibility of cooperation. The hybrid entity proposed a radical idea, a three-way alliance between humans, Gorn, and Krell. They envisioned a future where the Krell's advanced biotechnology could be combined with human ingenuity and Gorn strength, creating a force capable of facing any threat the universe might pose. The Krell leadership, initially skeptical, began to see the potential in this proposal. Their resistance wavered, then crumbled in the face of the hybrid entity's unwavering conviction and the promise of a secure future. As the negotiations reached a critical point, the physical toll on Timothy and Xena's merged form became critical. Their bodies, pushed beyond their limits, began to destabilize at a cellular level. The boundary between individual entities blurred, threatening to dissolve entirely. The experimental battlecruiser, now glowing with the same intense bioluminescent patterns as its hybrid pilots, held its position at the center of the paused battle. It stood as a physical manifestation of the bridge being built between three vastly different species, its fate inextricably linked to the success or failure of this crucial moment of first contact. With time running out and the fate of three species hanging in the balance, the hybrid entity made one final push. They poured every ounce of their remaining strength into solidifying the fragile agreement, knowing that their own survival, and perhaps their very identities, hinged on its success. As the Krell Dreadnought's systems slowly came back online, no longer under attack but now recalibrating for peace, the hybrid consciousness felt a glimmer of hope. But the battle was just getting started. The real challenge lay ahead, convincing both the human-Gorn alliance and the Krell fleet to lay down their arms and embrace this unprecedented opportunity for cooperation. The hybrid entity, its physical form barely holding together, prepared to address the combined forces. As they opened a channel to both fleets, they knew that the next few moments would determine not just their own fate, but the future of the galaxy itself. As the hybrid entity opened a channel to both fleets, a surge of psychic energy pulsed through the experimental battlecruiser. The strain of maintaining the complex mental link with the Krell, while simultaneously addressing the combined forces, pushed Timothy and Xena's merged consciousness to its absolute limit. "Attention all ships!" Their unified voice resonated across the communications channels, carrying an otherworldly timbre that blended human and Gorn tones. "We have established contact with the Krell leadership. A ceasefire has been negotiated." The announcement sent shockwaves through both fleets. Stunned silence gave way to a flurry of confused chatter as crews struggled to process this unexpected turn of events. The hybrid entity pressed on, their words carrying the weight of their unprecedented experience. "The Krell are not our enemies. They are refugees, fleeing an unimaginable threat. We have seen their memories, felt their fear. There is an opportunity here for cooperation, for a new alliance that could reshape the future of our galaxy." As they spoke, the hybrid consciousness felt a shift. The intense fusion that had merged Timothy and Xena began to waver. Their thoughts, once perfectly aligned, started to diverge. The separation was as painful as it was disorienting, like being torn apart at a cellular level. The experimental battlecruiser, pushed beyond its limits by the psychic output of its hybrid pilots, began to show signs of critical failure. Warning klaxons blared as systems overloaded one by one. "We must evacuate," Timothy's voice broke through, distinct from Xena's for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Xena's response came as a burst of Gorn instinct rather than words. Together they stumbled towards the nearest escape pod, their movements a strange dance of human and Gorn motor functions not quite in sync. As they sealed themselves inside the pod, the battlecruiser's hull began to buckle. The launch sequence initiated just as a cascade of bioneural energy ripped through the ship's core. The escape pod jettisoned into space, propelled by the force of the battlecruiser's implosion. The brilliant flash of its destruction temporarily blinded both Timothy and Xena, their shared bioluminescence pulsing in response to the energy wave. As the light faded, they found themselves adrift in the eerie silence of space. The pod's small viewport offered a surreal view of the motionless fleets, their weapons powered down, but still at the ready. Timothy turned to Xena, seeing her clearly for the first time since their fusion began. Her scaled skin now bore patches of smooth, human-like texture. Tufts of hair had sprouted from her head, framing eyes that looked decidedly more human than Gorn. "You look different," Timothy managed, his voice hoarse. Xena's gaze roamed over Timothy's face, taking in the iridescent scales that now adorned his cheeks and forehead. "As do you," she replied, her words carrying a mix of awe and concern. Before they could process the full extent of their transformation, the pod's communication system crackled to life. A Gorn voice, tinged with urgency, cut through the static. "Unidentified pod, this is the medical ship Kraz's Tar. We have you on our scanners. Prepare for retrieval." Timothy and Xena exchanged a look of relief tinged with apprehension. As the medical ship's tractor beam locked onto their pod, they braced themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. The ceasefire was just the beginning. Now they would need to navigate the complex process of building trust between three vastly different species. As the pod was drawn into the Kraztar's docking bay, Timothy reached out and grasped Xena's hand. Their fingers intertwined, a perfect blend of human and Gorn physiology. In that moment, they were a living symbol of the unity they hoped to forge on a galactic scale. The pod's hatch hissed open, revealing a team of Gorn medical staff whose eyes widened at the sight of the transformed pair. Timothy and Xena stepped out together, their bodies still glowing with residual bioluminescence, ready to face whatever came next in this brave new chapter of interstellar relations.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.